Testing, check, 1, 2, 3. All right, welcome to the Ninja Robot Studio LLC stream, where I play video games and VR experiences and talk through them from a UX designer's perspective. Game development has a very heavy and direct influence on XR development, so it makes sense that we would study game design to have a better understanding of how to create quality immersive experiences. This is an experimental method. I will iterate and change as I go and as people give me feedback, so do please feel free to give me feedback on what's working, what's not working, and we will iterate on it. And so usually I'll play a game and I work by genre. So I started with tabletop RPG games, and I played through a few. I played through some that were desktop, and then I played through some that were in VR. I don't have mixed reality. I don't have HoloLens or anything, so I can't do mixed reality because I just don't have access to the hardware. But we do VR and we do 2D on the desktop, and we study that. We gather patterns from it, and then we see what we can learn from it on what we may. And what I'm doing right now is, for this episode and the last episode, were kind of special episodes because we just finished up platformer games. I started with tabletop RPGs, now I'm doing platformers. And so what I'm doing is, for each game, you'll see here on the left, that I have all of the games that I played that were platformers up. Every game we'll go through and we'll do a rose, thorn, bud exercise after we're done. So I'll talk through it from a UX design perspective, and then we will do a rose, thorn, bud exercise based on the Pillars of Gaming UX by Celia Hodent. It's in her book, The Gamer's Brain. And these are Pillars of Gaming UX. We'll keep those in mind as we're playing, and then we'll do rose, thorn, bud. And the hope and the idea is that you will participate and contribute to this rose, thorn, bud exercise each time as well. That way you get experience doing it for yourselves, because teams work together to do these. Usually, ideally, you have a team of people working together to do these, but if not, you will still gain experience learning how to do this exercise. So I encourage you to participate. You can do it live here on Twitch. That's the goal, so that we're all talking to each other and giving feedback to each other on how we're doing. But you can also do it asynchronously through YouTube, through the YouTube videos on demand, because I do check those comments and I will respond to those as soon as I can within reasonable time. And so each game that we play, we do this rose, thorn, bud, and then if it's a 2D game, we'll talk about what we need to think about if we were to translate that into an XR experience. And so I have the rose, thorn, buds up. So like I said, this is a special episode, this one and the last one. Hopefully we'll wrap it up today. But I'm going through and I'm doing this with the tabletop RPG as well. It's just, I didn't do it live because we just finished the platformers. So that's what we're working on. But you will get something from the tabletop RPG one as well. But we're going through and we're synthesizing all of these different games. What was the overarching, what were overarching things that worked from all of them? And then what were some of the standouts from the individual games? And then we'll overarching issues. What were some of the issues that I had or that came up UX wise with all of the games that I played? And then what were some of the standout issues? And then what are the overarching recommendations that we would have in place for any kind of platformer that we created for XR? And then, so the Rose Thorn Bud exercise itself, let me explain that real quick. So the roses are what went well, what was a highlight, what did you like? And we want to keep track of the roses because we want to keep track of what is working, because that's how we know we want to keep doing that. We want to keep doing the things that are working. We don't want to inadvertently get rid of them as we're fixing all of the things that aren't working. So we want to remember the things that are working because we want to do more of that. And then the thorns are the things that aren't working. And we want to keep track of those because we want to find solutions for those things. And that's what the buds are. What are the opportunities that you see? What would you do differently next time? What questions do you have? And we would ideally have at least one bud per thorn. And any kind of follow-up questions, because you see I have over here on the synthesis. This one on the right is the synthesis, where I'm synthesizing all of the games that are on the left. And I have a follow-up here. I've got a lot of stuff that I need to go double check. And so that is also what you would do with the buds. What are your next steps? What are follow-ups? What are things that could be done better? What are things we need to investigate as potential solutions? We're not prescribing solutions unless it is a best practice that is a standard. If that's the case, then we would definitely prescribe that. Otherwise, we would explore a solution, like consider combining something. It's not a prescription. It's let's look at that and let's see if that's something. Because is there a reason for this interaction to be a separate interaction? So we don't want to make a judgment right away because we don't know all the facts. And the reason that I use Post-its is because that lets me give a short and concise note so that I can then, as you see that I'm doing now, I can take these short, concise notes and make them into anything. I can make them into a report. I can make them into some kind of other synthesis like I'm doing here. I'm breaking out and you will see me doing this today. What are the things that I'm saying? If I were to just go straight to a report instead of doing this method, then I would have to then, if I wanted to take that data and put it in any other form, I would have to go in and dig through my report, find the information. So doing it Rose Thorn Bud with Post-its lets me quickly find information and put it in any format that I want later. It could be a report, it could be a graphic, it could be whatever. So it's a lot easier to find info this way than digging through a dissertation later. And then after we're done with this part with me synthesizing it, we're going to also think about, okay, what do we need to think about for XR? What's the synthesis from that? Because I have notes on a few of these games, probably all of them. So I want to also synthesize that. And then once we've done that synthesis, then we'll think about what are the best practices that we need to learn that came up during all of this that we should keep in mind whenever we're doing platformers specifically. So let's go ahead and get started on that. Last session, I left a note here for myself. We stopped at Trine 2 Thorns. So I'm on Trine 2. Here, and so we'll just start there. Okay, so there was Trine 2. for context is, let's see if I got the link to the game. This is a side-scrolling, this is an older side-scrolling platformer. If you haven't tried it, I highly suggest it. It's a good one. Got beautiful artwork, character design. So I highly recommend it. I don't want to play that YouTube video because I don't want to get dinged for any kind of copyright issues. So not going to play it, but you can definitely find the trailers on YouTube and so forth. That's the game that we're looking at right now. So we finished up looking at Mariposa and Jivana on their thorns and their buds and their roses. And so now we're continuing with the thorns from Trine. No option for manual progression of dialogue. That is a very, very overarching theme that I'm finding. So you can't manually progress dialogue. Auto progression of dialogue makes me miss important information. So here again, we've got no option for manual progression of dialogue. So what are the buds that I put here? Add options for manual versus auto progress. So I have that here. Default manual progression on. I'm going to copy that one over because I don't have that one here. And now I have to rearrange all my post-its here. And you'll see that I have a line connected because I want to directly reference back to the thorn so that there's context. And this helps you to give context without having to write a long report. You just say, okay, so it's directly connected to that. And, you know, problem solved. You don't have to write long sentences and paragraphs on the issue because you can visually see how it's connected. Subtitles don't show automatically. Is this something that has been brought up before? It's been a week. I haven't looked at it since last stream, so this is not mentioned anywhere else. I'm gonna go ahead and clean these up because the connector lines are messed up now. The tool that I'm using is Miro. There are lots of tools out there that you could use. It doesn't have to be Miro. They do have a free version that you can use, so it's a good collaboration tool. They just changed their pricing plans to give you more free stuff, I believe. But you have a ton of space on your whiteboard. There is a ton of space, so you could do a lot with what you get for free. Okay, so subtitles don't show automatically. Was that an issue with any other game? Subtitles don't automatically show on... I don't think they automatically show on any of them. And the reason we want that, we want a combination of information. This, I should say, consider default. You always want to accompany voiceover with text, and the reason for that is, let's see, that is a best practice. External distractions. I'm going to go ahead and write it down, and we'll talk about that. But there's a lot of stuff going on, and the world around you is still happening, and it was which one was it? Ghost Giant that I was playing, and I was dealing with some distractions in the real world because my arm kept getting caught in the cable of my headphones because I needed my headphones plugged in so that I could stream and talk to y'all and y'all could hear me. But my cable isn't very long, and so I kept hitting my arm on my cable while I was in the game, and it kept distracting me from what was happening in the game, and I missed a lot of content because I couldn't manually progress the story. So I missed some information that was important and relevant, and there was no like subtitle or anything. So that's something that you want to think about for many reasons. Internationalization. The world is a lot bigger than we think it is. Not everyone speaks the same language that we do. And so we've got second languages going on. And yes, we can provide, but that is very difficult to provide multiple languages. That is a lot of work put into doing that. And that's why not all games do it. And that's why a lot of games only offer a few languages. And there are still many, many people out there who don't speak those languages. So it would be best to let you manually progress the dialogue and provide subtitle options. The manual progression helps with when you don't have the option of the right language, or someone has a cognitive issue, or things outside the headset are distracting you, because that's going to happen a lot. You're going to miss story. You can't rewind in a VR game most of the time unless you stop and restart. That's going to break you out of the immersion. So just let them manually progress, or give them the option to do so. If they want to just auto-progress, then fine, that's their prerogative, but give the option to do it manually, because there are many people out there who need that for many, many reasons. Subtitles don't show automatically. That goes back with that language issue. So consider default subtitles. I'm not going to say do it, because not all games have that in their budget to do all of this translation and so forth. But even if it's subtitles in the same language, that's actually very helpful, because again, it reinforces and helps with that understanding if there's distractions or your language is a second language they're not fluent in. Okay. Let's tie together so I can get rid of that noodle. Clean it up. Getting a little busy here with all the connectors. Okay. And not enough tooltips of what keyboard or controller button to use. This is on Trine to. Was that an overarching theme? Let's see, did Mariposa do that? And Jivana. Trying to remember. Kokoro Clover. They had, well, there was the issue of the different types of controllers. So let's see, there was an issue with tooltips. There was an overarching issue with tooltips. There always is. But they may have been different issues per game. So I'm thinking about what I'm going to do. I'm going to copy this one over to overarching. There was an overarching issue of tooltips. But there are specific issues per. So how did I do this and the rest of it? I think that I broke it out in the standout one. So I'm going to do an overarching theme that tooltips. There's not enough tooltips. Let's see. I have that as follow-up here. Because it doesn't look like I complained about it here. Let's see, did I say that it was a good thing? Okay. Now, I didn't mention it on those, so it may not be a overarching theme. So I'm just going to put it here. But now we've got all these things in the way. So let me try to clean that up a little bit. Yeah, the only downside to the visual connectors is that you've got noodle salad going on now. Okay. And so this is Trine 2. I'll just type Trine 2 there. And bring that over. And now I have a bud for that. I'm just going to scoot it down here. I'm tired of all the noodles. Just cleaning up my noodles here. Connector lines. This is getting messy. Okay, that one's connected to both of these. Okay. That's a lot cleaner. Okay. So not enough tooltips of what the controller button used. That's what we just did. Not enough controller type options. This was an overarching theme. That there weren't enough controller type options. So you want to give options for all the major types of controllers. Sony, Xbox, Nintendo, if it is even if it's a PC game. So like, especially if it's a PC game. If it's PC or cross-platform, give more controller types options. So if using Xbox options, still have to manually map buttons for Sony. Not remembering the context of the actions results in unusable controller interactions. So this was a trying to only thing because the other ones didn't. I don't think the other ones allowed you to map buttons. This is a trying to issue. So they gave me the ability to map button options, but they didn't give any context, so I had to guess what I was mapping what to, and then go play it to see whether or not it was going to work. And it was very cumbersome to have to do that, go back and forth to figure out what button combos were going to work and what wasn't. And I didn't have the patience to do it, so I just stopped messing with it and went back to keyboard. And keyboard is not my strong suit on playing for multiple reasons. One of which is I have small hands, so the keyboard reach is not there, and it makes interactions more difficult than a controller. So the bud for that one is explore ways to let people see how interactions behave in context to key binding setting page, because I didn't have any context. And then an example of that is show a preview of what would happen. Well, they're both tied, so that's fine. Yeah, okay. And now this was, why did I have pause, stop and pick back up where I left off? Why is that an option? Why is that a bud? This is not tied to anything, so I don't remember the context. Although it is a good thing, so let's see if I already have it on here. Consider combining, add signifiers, mark quest objectives, create tutorial, work with UX writer on wording, accompany instructions with visuals, give options for control of the camera, consider default subtitles, show memory cues. So no, it's not here, but it is a good thing to have because it does come up later in another game, especially VR. It is an issue in another game. So I'll go ahead and copy it over. Okay. Now we're done with the thorns and buds of Trine. Now on to Kokoro Clover. The intro cutscene starts playing immediately on launch in Japanese. And if you're not a native speaker of Japanese, that's a problem. And that's where the subtitle thing comes in. And this is a Kokoro Clover specific issue. I don't think it happened anywhere else. You choose to start it in all the others. Yeah. You choose to start in all the others. So it's just an issue with Kokoro Clover. Do I have a bud already for allowing them to start? Probably not, since... But I do have the subtitle thing. Where's the subtitle thing? Here it is. So I'm gonna put this one here. And this was Kokoro Clover. That's one of the reasons we want to auto subtitles. Because it could be someone that's from another country that's playing your game. And if you there are multiple reasons why you don't want a cutscene to start automatically. Especially in VR. See, did I even mention that here? If you'd like to allow... That is the best practice that you want. Is don't auto start. But allow player to initiate the start of the game, the scene. And that's not just by opening it. Because people are still getting situated, and like I mentioned, there's issues with cables and getting headsets situated and all kinds of things. Or wait, where'd it go? Here, I'm gonna move it. Okay, and also manual progression, give the option to auto progress in context. So the opening scene auto progresses. Let's see. That is an overarching theme, but the opening scene specifically is a problem here. Opening scene auto plays and auto progresses. Where is the option to here? Add the option to manually versus auto progress. Okay, and let's see, English subtitles body copy is too wide. And did we do that somewhere else already? Set a max body copy. Okay, so it's already here. I've already got it in here. Okay, it's already mentioned. Keep body copy for, yeah. So that's there. Controller options are limited. That was something that I mentioned here. You have to manually translate controller buttons to different controller mentally. Here. So I'm just going to copy these and add them to this because that is an overarching theme. Give more flexibility in controller options. That's going to go there with that. And tutorial teaches the basics of handling the normal forest monsters. This is specific to Kokoro Clover. The learning curve is very steep. And these are connected. Ooh. So that is going to go here. This is specific to Kokoro Clover. Okay. So I would change this. Consider smooth out the difficulty curve and the learning curve, and then make sure to add important mechanics. Important, like basic mechanics to the tutorial, because they didn't even include that. Switching, how do you switch between the spirits to get the different benefits? Didn't even cover it. So at all. So that was an issue for the boss fight. And that is Kokoro Clover. Okay, tooltip placement is out of line of sight of the hero. You have to take your eyes off the hero to see the tooltip. That is Kokoro Clover. Is that any other game? Let's see, Trine. It's not as big of a deal as Trine. It's an issue when it's a high action. Is something to think about though. So where do I put it? I don't think it was kind of an issue in Ghost Giant. So I'll put it here in the standout stuff. Kokoro Clover. Placement is out of light. You have to take your out of line of sight. So explore the placement of the tooltips in relation to the hero, so you don't have to take your eyes off. This is especially important in a. I'm going to add a new note here that it is especially important for high action situations. I can spell situations. Okay. All right, and I think that is it for Kokoro Clover. It's already translated Camille's Thanks again, Camille. I already translated that into the different things. Is there anything that I wanted to make sure that is in the standouts here? For Kokoro Clover. Let's see. Let's control the indicator, manual progress, onboarding. So I think there might have been a follow-up. Let's see, chapter select. Yeah, so I was going to follow up on chapter select. Okay. Yeah, that's it for now on Kokoro Clover. So now on to the VR games. Moss. Awesome. I highly recommend it. Okay. There weren't very many. There weren't very many thorns. That was only for that one. I hated seeing Quill die. So, assuming I remember buttons for jumping and using sword after a long period of not playing. Okay. Let's see. Do I have... That is... I don't know if that's a standout or if that's an issue with all of them. It's probably an issue with all of them. Nope. Okay, this is a moss one. Yeah, because it seems to be using mental models for PS controllers for jumping fighting. Maybe... I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. Because if you're brand new to PlayStation, then you're not going to know those things. That's going to copy over here as a follow-up. Are they assuming mental models? Does it translate to other headsets? That would be a follow-up. That's not a double check. I'm just keeping it. It's a standalone. This is actually a standalone too, so I'm going to move it. Apparently I have two. That was a Mariposa thing. But they didn't fully... It wasn't color only. They did have shapes. So yeah, they did have shapes. Okay. So this was just like a psychology one. How are players reacting when Quill dies? It's a very popular game, so I'm not sure. So now I need to... Oh. So if the player hasn't played in a while, offer hints again. This... Let's see. That ties in with that. So if the player hasn't played in a while, offer hints. How many players are getting stuck at certain points? Okay, now let's see. Camille did some more feedback on YouTube, so I'm gonna convert this into some rose thorn buds here real quick. So it says, I think I have one thorn and one opportunity after watching this episode, but this is my problem thinking for open discussion rather than solid bullet points. That's fine. As good as the onboarding experience was, I have a small misunderstanding of how each chapter of the introduction story ends and a player can turn to the next page. The sound or visual design wasn't signified enough for me to get proper knowledge that this part of the story is finished. As an opportunity, I would go for better voice modulation of the narrator that can make clear this part of the story is ended, and also make a more immersive experience, like hand the voice of the last syllable to create hang the voice of the last syllable to create suspense, and also add more visual hint to the page that the player should change the page. From the video, I reckon that only visual cues come from putting the controller close to the book. Another opportunity I would like to see is in-game hints for helping players complete chapters included in the storytelling experience. For example, there could be a riddle-like hint option for a player that could strengthen the experience, create less frustration with a lack of feeling that the player can't do something, and not break the immersive experience by the necessity to go on the internet and find a solution. That option may be customizable. For example, in the settings for the players that don't want the help, or power users. Okay. Now those are buds. So Camille wasn't sure when I was playing the Moss game. You can turn the book to progress the story at the beginning. Let me see. The introduction story ends and the player turns to the next page. So I did respond in the YouTube chat, I believe. I think that part of the problem was that I was turning the pages too quickly, but that was something that I needed to follow up on. So did I follow up on that? Did I add that to the things to follow up on? Nope. So I need to do that. Let's see. On Moss. I'm gonna, instead of uninstalling and reinstalling Moss, because I remember there being some tooltips at one point, but they're not showing anymore because I've already played. They took the tooltips away, and that's a Thorn. Don't assume. I think I have that already, but I need to check the demo because I have a demo disc on the PlayStation. See if they teach those tooltips. What tooltips they teach. Because I don't remember how I learned how to turn the pages in the book. I think that I need to actually add this over here too. So as a follow-up, I'll check the demo disc and see if they teach the tooltips. What tooltips are they teaching? Because I remember learning them somewhere. I'm not sure if they were using mental models, and that's where there was a question somewhere here. Are they assuming mental models of PlayStation controllers? Does that translate to other headsets? Because I have the version on the Quest. So how is that? And also, like, I need to double check that on the Quest, because I think I'm fine just uninstalling it on a... Also check Quest, because I only have the Quest and the PlayStation version. The PlayStation version is the one that I've been actually playing, so I don't want to uninstall that one and wipe my progress on that one, but I'm fine doing it on the Quest. I can try that and see if I learn, if they teach it. I don't remember. So as far as sound goes, I turned the pages too quickly. The narrator stops talking, and they won't continue talking until you turn the page. So that's how you know that you continue, is there is a I think their voice does... You do know that you have to turn the page. I don't know how long it takes you to figure that out, but you do know that you need to turn the page. And it's not so bad when you're in the headset because the artwork is so cool that you want to look at it anyway. So it's not a big deal. I think it's possible that the reason that I learned to turn the page was because when you're standing, the way they have the environment designed is that you are already positioned very close to that book. So if you move your arms at all, you're going to run into the book, and the book's pages are going to glow, and the controller's going to vibrate. Now, on the Quest, I believe that when you get close enough to the page to turn it, there's a vibration on the trigger button. Because with the Quest controllers, you can like pinpoint a vibration on different buttons. And so they pinpoint the vibration on the trigger, and that tells me I can use the trigger to interact with that thing. I don't remember if there are any other. I think there might be other tooltips, but I'm going off memory, so I'm going to double check it and see what happens there. So an opportunity is better voice modulation. So, but I think that they're already they're stopping talking, so that is what's happening. I just didn't wait because I'd already heard the story, so I didn't wait. Add more visual hint to the page that the player could change the page. So I'm going to double check. Well, that would be I'm going to try to take the time to double check to see if that's happening. I don't know when I'm going to have the time to do it, but I'll try. And then, what's the indicator that you can actually turn a page? It's like, what's happening there? And then another opportunity I would like to see is in-game hints for helping players complete chapters included in the storytelling experience, for example. So there was sometimes I would get stuck, and because he's referring to when I was telling a story of how I'm stuck at a certain point in the game, and I've been stuck at a certain point before. And what I would do, and what I usually do in games, is I'll just go online and look it up, because I'm not patient enough to sit there spending time figuring it out. I've got more things to do with my life than to do that. Not dogging on anyone that does enjoy doing that. I just don't. Because that is a very enjoyable thing that people like to do. Just not me. But so I get stuck sometimes on puzzles and end up looking up video on YouTube. And so that's what he's talking about. So then the bud for that would be like things being lined up. It annoys me when they're not lined up. So he was saying offer hints if person gets stuck. So now at the beginning, Quill did do that. She acted out, but over time she gave less hints. Then I would get stuck, and then that's where that comes in. So that is his suggestion here. Camille. Sorry if I'm getting your pronoun wrong. Creates less frustration with the lack of feeling. The player has to go, offer hints. Could be, so I will add that. Could be a settings option. For people. So people who enjoy hard puzzles and still don't have to see them. Okay. And so I think that was it. If you're watching this now or later, let me know if I missed or misunderstood that. But then follow-ups would be, what is the indicator that you can turn a page, and double check to see what tooltips are actually there, because I think they just don't show all of them, because I could have sworn that there were some that I saw, because I could have sworn I saw on the PlayStation an indicator that I needed to use the X button to jump and to climb, but I never saw it again. So I thought they showed it at least one time, but I don't remember when. And I think, so maybe there were some tooltips that they only showed once. But then other ones, like the Ghost Controller ones, always show at the beginning there. But that would have to be double checked. Then let me add that question here. On Moss. Okay. And so that's it for Moss. There weren't any real problems with Moss. Okay. Great experience. I highly recommend it. Okay, now Ghost Giant. That one had some issues. Multiple yeah. Oof, that was annoying. That was a standout just for them. Multiple NPCs were talking at once while Lou was also talking to me. It was very annoying. There were a lot of tasks going on. These were standouts just from Ghost Giant. Okay. And then these are the buds from it. So it makes me want to stop playing because there was so many NPCs talking at once. It was really annoying. And at the same time, I was trying to figure out the puzzle. Louis kept trying to high-five me. Just read the room, dude. I'm trying to figure it out. So it got annoying. Not sure if it was a big deal or not. It was a problem for me. So that would be a follow-up, is it a bigger deal than I think it is? Because it may have just been me, but you want to test with your target audience to see whether or not that is an issue with other players, because I stopped playing the game. I stopped. Because it was annoying. Now I went back later and with the sound off, I didn't have my headphones on, and then I was able to think without all the NPCs like talking. And what I did realize is that the NPCs were giving me hints, but at the same time, it's like they kept talking all at once, some at the same time. It's like they weren't even necessarily waiting for each other to finish speaking. And of course, spatially, they're out of context and all that. So in real life, they wouldn't be talking to each other. But for the sake of the sanity of the player, you might want to think about your timing of the hints. And I still quit because I couldn't figure out what I was supposed to do, because I couldn't. I still wasn't able to finish it. I got stuck because again, I stopped listening to the NPCs because they were annoying me. If I had listened to them again, I probably would have been able to get all the hints. So that one went with that. Test whether or not this is an issue. Okay. That was specific to Ghost Giant. Okay, can't manually progress dialogue. That was overarching somewhere. Yeah. You have to pause the game. When paused, can't interact with anything. You can like pause the game. I think I'm not sure if you can do that on all of them. Not sure. I think if you like pull up a menu or something, it'll pause the game on all of them. Yeah, it will. It'll pause the game on when you pull up the menu, but but Ghost Giant actually had an option to pause. That was an actual like controller button, but I don't remember which controller button. And it took me a while to remember that, so I missed a lot of dialogue. Okay, having trouble following the dialogue while trying to figure out the tasks. That was one of the reasons I needed to pause. Because the dialogue just kept going. Which is one of the reasons why you want to give people the ability to manually progress. It was a big problem in Ghost Giant for me, because I was still trying to figure out the tasks and I was missing important story because I'm trying to figure out the task and they're just talking. Talk. And whenever I paused, I couldn't interact with anything to figure out, is this the right issue with the puzzle? So the execution was kind of frustrating of how they did it. Okay, but I think it's still important to note. So I'm going to go ahead and put it here. Okay. This is all Ghost Giant. Where did that point? Can't manually progress dialogue. That one's not. Wait. Did I miss something? Oh, I didn't even copy that one. Okay, so no. I would say these. Let's see, cognitive load with which button to press to turn the view, having trouble following call. Right, those were connected. This is a Ghost Giant specific issue, but it is an overarching issue as well. So there is add options to for manual and auto progress. Let's see. Wait, I need to add Kokoro Clover here. And now I need to put the Ghost Giant issue. Let's see, I have multiple ones, so I'm just gonna have to draw a line up there. That's, I guess. Well, let me see. So figuring out tasks, trying to remember which button does what, external distractions happening, phone cord, cognitive load with which button to press, turn view was also making me have trouble following dialogue. That was also an issue. So explore placement of in-world button reminders. How can that be done to reduce distraction from the story? Because I was distracted trying to find the buttons tooltips because they were directly down in the that's actually in the area where you're not supposed to have content, actually. So they placed them in that area where it's recommended you don't put any content. So let me actually, that's something I just now realized. Okay, I'll put it here with this one. Tooltips placed in the, it's called the no-no zone. That sounds bad. Or we'll just call it the no zone. It's where you're not supposed to put any content. Like directly down beneath viewer in the no zone because it's hard to see. And so you're not supposed to place stuff in that content area. And so that one also goes. It's also take advantage of 3D space. And in design tooltips, we fit diegetically. I don't know if I spelled that right. Diegetic into environment. Let's see how you spell diegetic. It's E. Yeah. Well, the train is coming. I'm probably gonna have to mute. We'll see. So here, wait. Let me connect it from this one. It's coming. I can hear it. It's gonna honk like right outside my house. I hear it honking. Okay, now make sure that it says Ghost Giant. Okay, and then can't reach some of the colors for that they're asking for to complete the tasks. This is a standout theme in Ghost Giant. I'm not saying Ghost Giant was a terrible game, but there were a lot of issues with it. And we can learn from those. Design the environment to let people reach stuff. And if it's in the distance, give them a way to reach it from a distance. It place a reminder for how to reach things. If that is something that can be done. And then completely missing some of the hints in world because you're looking in a way and they disappear. That was a Ghost Giant issue. That is an issue that needs to be considered for sure. So we're going to put it here in the standalones. There were a lot of standalones for Ghost Giant. Completely missed some of the hints because the world disappearing, turning back head. So we're explore how to make sure people see the hints, directing attention, putting in the field of view. You're basing it on the field of view instead of the spatial world placement. Base it on the field of view instead of the spatial placement in the world, because they had it placed at a specific place in the environment, but the story was happening, or at least I was getting acquainted to my new environment, I think, because the scene had changed, and so I was looking around, and so that's another reason that we want to auto progress stuff and to let people give time to acclimate to a new. Let's see. There's a lot of best practices to cover here. I can't remember the name of that one though. Let's see. Let's talk about onboarding. Because I kind of talk about it in there. And I also talk about training best practices. Okay. Let's see. Consider reducing the size of the scene to fit in a comfortable field of view. The way the Moss does that. Because the way they designed their environment, it was similar to what Moss did, only Moss had it to where you didn't have to turn or there weren't things behind you. That's another thing. You don't want to design things so that they're behind you. You want them to focus on, there are ways to do it. Okay. Directing attention. Let me see. I need to add directing attention to the best practices. Here, list. Directing attention. Okay. And then forget that you can pause, not thinking about it and not thinking of it like a movie. Think of it like a game. So what's the mental model for the target audience here? There is an actual option to pause. And I don't think of pausing a game to, I'll think of pausing a cutscene, but their way of doing it was the cutscene was a part of it and it's all happening at the same time, and maybe that's part of the problem. Not sure. That might be part of the problem. Okay. And that's it for, well, no, we've got a comment from Camille. Thank you again. Let's see. You got me thinking about PSVR and the overall design of controllers. The struggle to remember the placement of the buttons on the controller is a common thing for people, and I was thinking if those controllers were well designed. Is there on the PSVR controller some kind of signifier or touch on the buttons that you could feel the shape on the button with your finders? And what Camille's talking about here is very important. Our user experience is not just about the experience, the actual software, the application, whatever that you're creating. It's the whole thing. It's the hardware. How is the hardware designed? What are the controllers? How are they designed? And the PSVR controllers, specifically the current ones, now the new ones that they're coming out with are much more like the Quest. If you look at the design of them, the button configuration is like the Quest, and that's what everyone seems to be going for now, is that configuration of buttons, because it's a simple configuration and it works well and it conforms to your hand, so it's comfortable. And that seems to be the design everyone's going for now. But with the original PSVR wand controllers, Let's see if I can reach it. Now, granted, these came out when all that was on the market for people was the Vive, the original Vive with their wand controllers. Let me pull up the original Vive controllers. Okay, this is the original Vive wand controller. Doesn't conform to your hand very well. The grip button's on the side in a very awkward position. The trigger's the only thing, and the touchpad were the only thing that were really comfortable. The grip button is a flat button that was flush with the side of the controller, and you had to... It was very uncomfortable to try to use the grip button. So this was the main competition at the time the original PlayStation came out. Now, the Rift... original... those controllers, that's the Rift too. Come on, show me the original. Here. Looks a lot like the new one. Oh, why did you do that? I just want to see the image. This is the original Rift. It looks almost exactly like the current, except for the little circle antenna thingy is facing the other way. But the button configuration is the same. And so that's the trend that everyone's going towards now. The new PlayStation VR, I was just looking at it yesterday. Their controller, can I get a better picture? Just go to their official site. That has a better picture, I think. Yeah. Button configuration looks almost exactly like the Quest configuration. The only difference is that the orb design covers your hand, which kind of reduces that risk of like banging your controllers against each other because it's over your hand now instead of sticking out like the other controllers. Like these controllers stick out. And now the original PlayStation VR controllers, I've got right here. It is more like the Vive. So back when the PlayStation VR came out, the Vive was out, and the... Oh, stop it. I hit the wrong thing. And the original Rift was out, which was almost exactly the same as the Quest controller. And so their main competition, the most popular one, was the Vive. And so their controllers are a wand. The original controller is a wand, and it has buttons on it. And they are the X and the circle and the triangle and the square, but they're in a different configuration than the PlayStation controller. So they were trying to use the same mental model, but the placement of the buttons, it would have been better if the placement of the buttons had been the same as it is on that controller, instead of changing it in this shape that it is here. Because I had to study this controller to see that it is the same configuration if you tilt it. So the X is on the bottom, and then it's all the same configuration, but you can't see that when you're in a game. So this is... It's hard to remember which is the X, which is the triangle, and so forth. And I didn't even look on the controller to see if there were any kind of... Because he's asking... let's see, Camille is asking... Sorry again if I got your pronoun wrong. some kind of signifier or touch on the buttons that you could feel the shape of the button with your finger. So what they're kind of talking about here is the on the keyboard, on the F and the J of your QWERTY keyboard, there's a little dot. So you can, if you touch type, which I do, you know where to place your index finger on the F and the J, because that's where you touch type. You start your typing, and everything lines up based on those two dots. And the same on the numeric keypad or on a calculator, you've got a dot on the 5, on the 5 key of that, so that you know, okay, now I can touch type on the numeric keypad based on the 5, based on the position of the 5. This one, there is a small dot exactly like that on the X, so that would tell me where the X is, but I never noticed it until Camille asked the question, which was a couple weeks ago, and I've had that thing for a while. So it wasn't clear, and it didn't occur to me that the configuration is the same, just shifted like 45 degrees. So it is the same button configuration, just shifted 45 degrees, but that is an extra amount of cognitive load than is necessary. It could have just been shaped just like the original. I don't see any reason for it to not have been. I don't know why they did it that way. So maybe they have a reason, but it would have been easier to just keep the same button configuration if they're going to use the same like symbols anyway. Just use the same configuration because we're already used to that controller. It's easier to remember that way, but they didn't. Anyway, it's done. But yeah, so you need to think about the design of your hardware, especially if some of you are fortunate enough to be on a team that is actually creating hardware, and that is a possibility because it is still a new enough space where that's going to happen. So if you are fortunate enough to be a part of that, think about the actual physical design of the controllers, because it does matter, especially when you can't see the controller. So then Camille is saying, I don't have a VR headset, but check the photos of these controllers and I don't see any hints on the buttons. And they're comparing it to the Xbox series. I don't have an Xbox. Personally, I don't have the Xbox or the Xbox controller, so I don't know this, but Camille is saying that Series X, the pad buttons for the trigger, the left bumper, the left trigger, the right button, the right trigger, have... Let me see if the PlayStation has that. Well, they have the letters engraved, but it's not distinguishable, but you can tell left and right. Triggers and buttons, those are fine, but the actual buttons don't have any like indicator. The shapes don't have any indicator on them. But it says that these have the letters on the button so you can recognize the button that you're using with your touch sense. So the PlayStation controller does have that on the bumpers, but it's not to the degree that you could actually tell. You could actually use your sense to tell based on that alone what it is. But for the bumper and the trigger, it's not as big of an issue as it is with those other buttons. It's not as big of an issue on the standard controller as it is for a VR controller that you're using with your eyes covered so you can't see the controller. So yeah, there is a signifier of that little dot on the X. And then, of course, you can figure out your placement of all the buttons based on this middle button, because it's a different shape button. So then you can use that as your context. But the problem is remembering which one's the X, which one's the O, and so forth, until you get used to it. So they were wondering about TouchSense. I don't know if this is the ultimate answer, but this may be one step. towards helping users reduce the necessity of looking on the controller to know which button they should click. And this time I don't have any additional roses or thorns, but really enjoy your analysis. Okay, I think that was a good question. Really good question. Anyway, really good input. So then that would be, so think about the design of actual controller to help signify buttons by touch, so they don't have to look at it, is what Camille is saying here. That is very good. I will see that one. Hold on. See, that one went with there. Okay. That goes here. Then another thing that ties in with that, teaching people how to onboarding. Let's see, memory cues and tooltips. Memory cues and tooltips. Okay, and let's see, that was all the games and all of the rose, thorns, and buds. So now let's look at translating that into XR. So what do I have here? I'm just going to wait for this to reconnect. So that I can copy all this over. So I'm just gonna quickly copy all of my notes from all of the different games, Jivana, and then we're gonna just, because a lot of it carries over from one to the next, so we'll just synthesize it on this one. Translating to XR. So what are we needing to think about when we're translating a platformer to XR? This is some of the same stuff. Might be a duplicate, because I do remember doing that at one point. Come on, stop that. I think I'm like pushing the limits of what Miro can do with all my windows open. Okay. And now we'll just go through those. And I think that's everything from here, so I might be done with these. Yeah. Wait, hold on. What was this? That was specifically for trying to find a color blindness emulator. It wasn't about the game. Do I have anything else like that? Let's see. I followed, that's already covered. That I've already got covered. Okay. Yeah, so I think that's everything from these. Let me adjust my view here. Hold on. Make this one bigger. Give me a moment. Okay, so now we can see this better. Now, okay, so this one was the first one, which was Mariposa. Would make a great VR experience. Have to think strongly about how to mitigate, how to mitigate motion sickness. Study Moss and Trine 2 for motion sickness mitigation. Okay. So what Moss and Trine 2 do... So let's see. Moss and Trine 2 disconnect the camera from the character. That was a standout from them. Oh, Ghost Giant does it too. I'll just put it over here. Moss Trine 2 and Ghost Giant separate the camera from the character that you're playing, because they're 3D, or no, Trine 2 is 2D, but the camera is not directly attached to the character that you're playing, and that reduces the risk of sickness. So this is all around motion sickness. If it makes people sick in 2D, it's definitely going to make them sick in VR. So that is if it is a VR. If it's mixed reality, you need to think about surfaces. You want to think about your interactions. They're different depending on the headset that you're using. They're going to be different on the HoloLens versus the Magic Leap because they have different input devices, input types. So you have to think about that whenever you're creating your platformer. And there's no standard for that with the mixed reality. It's different for every headset. And so you need to know that. You know the limitations of each of those headsets. And that's true for all of them, but especially for MR right now, because VR is, you're seeing, as I showed earlier with the controllers, that there is a standard controller coming out that you can see emerging from VR, but mixed reality, no, there's not one yet. So that's still to come. Okay, and so then you have to know which mixed reality headset you're going to design this thing for, know the input types, design the experience accordingly, because the interactions are going to be different depending on which mixed reality headset you use. It's easier on VR from that perspective because it's a lot easier to translate from one controller to the other, but when you have completely different input types for mixed reality, like the Magic Leap input device is a 3DOF controller. So let me all the input types. So we need best practices for all the input types. That has to be covered because the different input types have workarounds, pros and cons, and things that you have to understand to create interactions that are going to work for them. Hand gestures are going to be different than direct manipulation. It's going to be different than a 3DOF controller versus a 6DOF controller. It's going to have completely different interaction capabilities. So you have to understand that when you're designing. Okay, proper and realistic NPC behaviors are vital in VR. And you have to code that behavior back in. I think I have a video on NPC behaviors. I will double check. I think I do. Proper realistic NPC behaviors are vital. I know I talk about it a lot. So the load times. Load time indicators are very important since you're immersed in the world, and I do have load times content. If the screen just goes black or still, or a still image is stuck to your viewport, that makes you feel like it froze, the game froze, which can be confusing or can make you take off your headset and then you're going to miss something because you took your headset off. If the image stuck to the viewport can also give the feeling of vertigo, especially if there's lag from performance. And I've had that happen to me on a game. I'm not going to name the name of the game because I don't... I would not ever play that game again, though. It was a terrible VR experience because they just lifted and shifted a 2D game onto a VR experience. They didn't fix their... they didn't optimize it for VR. They didn't worry about performance. They didn't think about how like psychology works in VR, immersed 3D versus a 2D game. They didn't change the menu behaviors and how you interact with it. They didn't map the controllers properly from the PC game controllers to the VR controllers. Nothing. They just lifted and shifted, and it was terrible experience, and the performance was terrible. So there was a lot of lag, a lot of vertigo potential. So you can't lift and shift. Okay, so now that means let's talk about cross-platform. Cross-platform, designing across platforms. I do have content on that. And motion sickness. So I've got motion sickness. The camera control should always be in the hands of the player. Then I have motion sickness best practices. So let's put that in here. Okay. So I've got this column, learn the best practices. So what is everything that we're talking about here? Where can you learn more? So we have this column over here. So that's going to help with whatever my output ends up being later. And now I think these are duplicated. Let me look real quick. Yeah, these are the same, so I go ahead and delete that. These are also duplicated. Okay. That is a duplicate. And let's see. Manual progression is very important. Let people manually progress the story. Take motion sickness seriously. MR more likely needs to be third person. Moss handles motion sickness well. I think I already have that, so that is the manual progression is very important. Let's see, detached character. Now, we'll finish it this stream, this little bit of it. Separate the camera, study Moss and Trine 2 for motion sickness, and look at how that can go. Look at how Baobab Studios handles cinematic VR experiences. Let's see, take it seriously. People don't take it seriously. Or they don't care that there's this entire population of people out there that get sick from the experiences. Oh well. I feel fine. That's not the right attitude, especially if you're a UX designer. And you want to actually sell your game. MR more likely needs to be third person. And that's because you can still see the real world. And you're not... you can't locomote in mixed reality the way you can in VR, because you can still see the real world. So you would have to design something different for mixed reality, because you do have the real world still in view that you can see. So it's going to be a different experience. Probably more like what you would see in Moss. Probably more like what you would see in Moss, maybe. I mean, you could probably like expand the world to make it a little bigger, but you want to also be careful how much you expand that world, because you still need to see what's going on. How would you transition that? So you need to think about motion sickness in mixed reality as well, because it can still happen in there. If it can happen in 2D, it can happen in mixed reality. And it definitely is going to happen in VR. Give So this is an overall one. Give clear signs for optional versus required tasks. I think I have more to say about motion sickness. Again, that is the biggest thing. Motion sickness is the biggest issue. Let's see. And I've got the best practices, so that's good. And do I have anything else about motion sickness? Okay. Also give clear signs for optional versus required tasks. Proper realistic NPC behaviors are vital in VR. Load time indicators are very important. Manual progression is very important for VR especially. So now this is a little decision tree that I made. If you're creating a VR experience, consider whether you want first-person or third-person platformers. If first-person, there's a much greater risk of motion sickness. Here, let me like create a tree, a better tree here. If it's third person, don't attach the camera to the character. Detached character can keep the player stable with less forced motion. It's much better for motion sickness. And that ties, where's that? I saw that somewhere up here. Yeah. I'm gonna do that. Okay. Let me move that so that's closer. Okay. So now these are the kind of the learnings that we took from that. And we have more learnings, but this is a good synthesis of everything so far. And now we can then take this and do another step of writing up some findings and tying in best practices to that to make this to then create out of this best practices for platformers. That's the goal, is to create. Now we've got best practices for if we're going to create a platformer, what do we need to do to make ours a great experience in XR? Let's see, were there any other best practices to cover? And as you're writing, you'll think of if you understand the best practices. And again, you can find those on. I've got multiple sources. I've got a link tree. I will include that in the. There's another train coming. I will put that in the show notes on YouTube. But there's the UX for XR toolkit where you can learn all the best practices. Everything's here. And in here you've also got how I've got a pattern library of how other people have solved the problem, how they solved the problem of telling a backstory without making people sick. Moss is a great example of that. Gaming, that's all of the videos from here. And then the differences in the UX process for XR versus traditional 2D and so forth. So this is a great resource. That most of the content on here is free. There is some content that is, you can get early access to the videos if you become a patron, and you can also get full access to the pattern library. A lot of the patterns are free, but you get full access by becoming a certain patron tier. And those tiers are supporting keeping me caffeinated. That's really important. Or the barista tier gets you, all of them give you exclusive Discord benefits, and nobody else is in that Discord channel except for my patrons. And you get early access to the videos that I make, and you get, if you become an aficionado, you get full access to the pattern library as well as all the other things. And all of the videos are on demand on the YouTube channel. And you can also connect with me on LinkedIn and stuff. But to learn the best practices, this is your one-stop shop for everything, because it's all on here. And so understanding the best practices is going to help you know off the top of your head which best practices do I need to mention for this thing, and also which best practice is going to cover the buds on here. And these are all of the things that I would need to go double check to verify whether or not there was an issue, and what can we learn from that issue that we find. And I will think about whether or not I do that live. Maybe we can do it live. It's going to be a little bit more tricky doing it live because of the technology I have to set up for everything. Definitely can't do the quest right now. I have the original quest, and it's not streamer friendly at all. So without extra money for technology, so it's not a thing right now. But here is our synthesis on platformer games. There's a lot here, a lot of opportunities, a lot of buds, a lot of things to follow up on, and a lot of things to think about for translating into XR. So this is how this process works. I played through, what was it, 6 games, both 2D and VR, and then I gathered the patterns from that. What were the overarching things that worked? What were the standouts from the individual games that worked? What were the overarching issues? And what were the individual standout issues? Because we still need to learn from those to make sure that we don't make those same mistakes. And then what are the overarching recommendations based on these things, based on these thorns, these issues? And we have at least one bud per thorn, so that's good. And we've thought about, okay, now how do we, what do we need to think about when we're translating something into XR, in this case, platformers? Motion sickness seems to be a very big issue, so that's the biggest issue that we're seeing here. And we also need to consider, if it's mixed reality, we need to think about it differently, because you've got to think about surfaces. You can still see the real world, so that's going to affect things. Locomotion is going to be different in a mixed reality experience, because again, your real body, you can't move it around like you can in VR. So that's going to be a completely different experience. So you have to think about that. How would that, and be creative still, and take advantage of the strengths of the platform, but you also have to understand the weaknesses of the platform to do a great experience with it. And there's a lot of potential for that for mixed reality, really, once it's finally available to the masses. And if you're thinking about doing I didn't even cover mobile AR, because I usually just cover heads-up displays, because mobile, you can find best practices for mobile on Apple and Google. They both have best practices for mobile AR, so I don't cover it. I just cover the head-mounted displays mostly. But if you're doing mobile, you want to think about ergonomics. How long are they holding up the phone or the tablet, whatever they're using? Because your arms are going to get tired. And think about back when Pokemon Go came out and everyone was playing Pokemon Go while driving their car, which is completely idiotic. But it happened. I almost got hit multiple times on foot and in car by people driving and playing Pokemon Go in parking lots. So, first of all, don't do that. Park your car. Think about that as a designer. How can you prevent that from happening? You don't want to design your experiences to encourage that kind of behavior because it's very unsafe. But that's all I have to say about mobile. And that is it for today's stream. I will see y'all next week. Thanks for watching.